Hey friends, and welcome back to session 3 of our mentor training. So again, Bruce Kendrick, Terry, and we want to walk through kind of an abortion 101, but we were talking just before we got started, and I thought Terry had a great point just for you as you're thinking about how much of this am I actually going to have to know and unpack as a mentor.
Absolutely. As I'm sitting here listening to this, and I just want to communicate that as a mentor on our team, we do not expect you to be well-versed in apologetics about life and about abortion. We just want you to be equipped with a general overview of kind of how we got here as a country and kind of what the general school of thought is in the society around us. But don't sit here and think, oh no, I'm not going to be able to regurgitate every bit of this word for word. That is okay. We just want you to just have a basis of knowledge as we're moving forward into these next steps of our mentor training.
Yeah, so one of the things that I think is important to remember is when you're engaging with a woman with an unexpected pregnancy or talking to a man, they're not going to care what the history of abortion is. You saying that there were 60 million abortions since Roe v. Wade was passed in 1973 is not going to convince them to not have an abortion. However, for us, as mentors, as leaders, as believers that are looking at what has been happening in our culture, in our country, and partially due to our lack of commitment in this area and not understanding what the Bible says, we have really been apathetic and we have stepped back and not been engaged in ways that we should have been. And so we repent of that. We turn from that and we go, hey, let's make sure that our brothers and sisters are equipped and ready to take the next step forward. So statistically speaking, that 60 million abortions since Roe v. Wade in 1973 sounds like a huge number when in reality, that's just in the United States alone. So it certainly doesn't include abortions prior to Roe v. Wade. And you may have people that go, gosh, well, abortion had to be made legal so that women wouldn't die from illegal abortions. Just a clarifying fact, women were not dying from illegal abortions. Whether abortion is illegal or not does not determine whether or not a woman was dying from it. The invention of penicillin and antibiotics that happened back in the 1940s drastically decreased the number of people that died from any surgical process or procedure, as opposed to whether that procedure was legal or illegal. So some of the people that kind of inflated those numbers to say, gosh, all these women are dying, are people that eventually turned a man specifically by the name of Bernard Nathanson, who became a pro-life proponent later in life and came to know Christ, was an OB-GYN, went, yeah, we just kind of inflated those numbers. And so we know that under 1 million abortions take place every year, 3,000 abortions a day. And when we go out to abortion clinics to counsel those women, to reach out to them and to call out and say, hey, there are other options available for you. Would you come talk to us? We know that a lot of those abortions just get piled up on Fridays and Saturdays, and they are just cranking them out one after another, and it is not a humane process. It really is an industry. Women in their 20s account for a vast majority of the abortions that take place, and the average patient that is having an abortion is typically a black woman who already has one child and she's single. So you can see how some of the people that are making these choices are unmarried, are in poverty, already have one child and are parenting are going, I don't know how I could care for another child. Those are all legitimate concerns. They aren't legitimate reasons for ending the life of another person. So some of the historical background about abortion, what started and is commonly known as Planned Parenthood in 1942, actually evolved out of the American Birth Control League in 1938, led by Margaret Sanger, who was a eugenicist. And we talked about eugenics in the last session, but Margaret wasn't actually that pro-abortion. She was pro-forced sterilization, but when it came to abortion, she was actually kind of like, we don't want to go that far. She would be astounded today to see abortion as common as it is. It was men that came along in the 1960s and a guy by the name of Larry Lader who wrote Margaret's biography that actually pushed the abortion movement. So additionally, I think Margaret really saw some of the same things that we see today, where we go, gosh, we've got these women who are getting pregnant outside of marriage and not able to care for themselves, not able to care for their children. And so she just went, what can we do differently? And that's where she started to help invent the contraceptive pill and push birth control and make it more available and make it more accepted, which is really what we see across our culture today. In some ways, we even see it where like birth control is handed out like candy for any issue that a woman might have in healthcare, of like, hey, this is going to take care of acne, or this is going to take care of some other issue. And so there are some consequences and some implications that have just not been thought through. And yet we've got some OB-GYN friends who have weighed in on that, who have said, hey, these are responsible contraceptives and these are not, and we need to be thoughtful about those. We certainly don't want to get ourselves into a position where we go, hey, if we can just put every woman on birth control, then that's the end of the problem. Because there were women early on in the 1920s, a woman specifically by the name of Alice Paul, who helped write the amendment that led to women being able to vote, that said abortion is the ultimate exploitation of women. It effectively allows a man to look at a woman as just a sexual object, to be gratified in that, and then go, well, you can have an abortion and I can walk away from this responsibility. So the demand for abortion really came about as abortion was framed as a denial of rights and privacy rather than an exploitation of women.
Bruce, what you said about doctors pushing the birth control pill is so very true. And I mean, I think that most women sitting here can speak from experience. I know that since I've been about 12 years old now until I'm in,
Wow. Yeah.
and in my mid to late 40s, every single time I have gone to the doctor's office, they try to put me on the pill for a number of things. And I'm not saying that it is not a tool as a hormone or something like that, but it seems to be an across-the-board answer, as this is what women need in order to heal a majority or a lot of their ailments.
Wow. Yeah, well, and I know that some of the research that I've looked at actually shows that they looked at creating some of the same contraceptives for men using very similar hormones, and men effectively went, I can't deal with the side effects. And so one of the things that we have said as a church is just like, hey, if the male is the active participant in sex, then he should take on more of the responsibility of ensuring that his wife does not get pregnant, rather than her taking that on and us continuing to kind of chemically modify a woman's body to prevent pregnancy. So a couple of resources that we would point you to if you're interested in more of a deep dive into some of this content is Subverted by Sue Ellen Browder and Feminine Mystique by Betty Friedan. So Sue Ellen Browder was on staff with Cosmopolitan during the 60s whenever the sexual revolution was going on, and she saw some of the messaging that was happening and being given to women to effectively say like, hey, you can move your way up by having sex with men, and then abortion will give you some freedom so that you can still continue to move your way up and you don't have to get pulled out of the marketplace and can continue to earn. And then Betty Friedan was the president of the National Organization for Women, and they were the ones that effectively added abortion to their legislative platform in the mid-60s that moved everybody else in that direction as well. Because when women were leading this, as they are in many ways still today, that's what was moving the needle on politics. That's what was moving the needle on our laws. And so the pro-choice culture really tells a woman that Christians hate sex, that we want sex contained, that we want to take control of a woman's body, that historically an abortion culture does not treat women with respect. And so it's a very negative lens to look through. And in some ways, those I think we can say like, yeah, in a way, we understand that sex outside of marriage is not good for anyone, that God did design it for good, for husbands and wives, and yet in our sinfulness, in our brokenness, we have gone, you know what, God, I don't want to do what you want. I don't trust you. This feels good, and so I'm going to do it. And yet we have seen that both women and men in many ways have been exploited through the legalization of abortion and even the work of birth control. So by making abortion a private, personal decision, we've denied women the public support to carry their babies to term and promote a culture that makes it okay to abandon the gift that God has given them. There is very much a sense of like, gosh, you're pregnant, and so you're almost somehow disabled, when in reality, what we should be doing is going, gosh, you were pregnant. Like, what an awesome gift. How do we promote your care and your well-being and your wholeness as you continue to grow and as this child continues to grow inside of you? We have effectively said, hey, woman, if you are pregnant, you can make the private decision to bear your shame privately so that no one has to know. You can go and it's just a decision between you and your doctor so that you don't have to bear the public shame of an unexpected pregnancy. And we as a church have to respond differently to that, where a woman might have an unexpected pregnancy and we just, with grace and love and yet truth, go, hey, let us walk alongside you. Let us show that you can trust your creator, your maker. And men are no longer held responsible in this pro-choice culture. It really is a little bit crazy that we would tell a woman, yeah, you can end the life of your child, but we would shame a man for walking away from a woman who has an unexpected pregnancy. Those are very equivalent ideas to go, well, if neither of you are responsible, then what is happening in this abortion procedure? If there is a life being lost, if there is something being terminated, what is it and who's responsible for that? And male ignorance really is equal to or greater than female ignorance. When we talk to some of our Pregnancy Resource Center partners, they say, look, the guys that come in here are usually not manipulating a woman. Usually they're like totally naive and just going, look, you make whatever decision you're going to make.
My silence is supportive.
Yes, gosh. And what could be less supportive than just going, look, you have to make the decision, whatever decision you make, I'll support. I'm not going to contribute to it. I'm not going to support you. I'm just going to stand by passively and go, hey, I'm just here to do whatever you want. And that could not be seen as loving in really any other circumstance where we saw someone being abused or neglected or exploited. So some additional thoughts that I think are important, and I mean, just chime in, because I like, honestly, I didn't know about feminism until later in like my 20s, where I was like, what is this concept as a whole anyway? But it really has been redefined from a sense of women's equality, where we had the first wave feminists like Alice Paul, who I mentioned earlier, where they wanted the right to vote, they wanted equal pay, and some of those things that were even going on in the second wave, to this idea of a woman has to be able to end the life of her child in order to be free, normalizing abortion as healthcare.
Many of you watching this are going to remember that I think it was about 2 to 3 years ago, there was a billboard in South Dallas that actually said, abortion is self-care for women. I think that just sums up just the narrative of what culture is trying to speak to women in this generation.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think another thing that has come to mind for me is just how the dignity and responsibility of fatherhood has been lessened and undermined over the past several decades, to effectively like, hey guys, you're not responsible. Don't worry about it. It's easy for you to walk away. And a lot of the men that go through our after-abortion care ministry, that's kind of what they believed. And so they now feel convicted that they were passive in that, and that they didn't defend the life of their child, that they didn't stand up and say something even when they feel like they could have. Where they could have provided, where they could have parented, whether it was to get married or to co-parent, or even when the mother of their child is now their wife, or they were married when they had the abortion. Some of those things that have come across that have just been brokenhearted for those men, for those women, to go, God, like, have we not seen the lies of Satan impact those that we care for, those that we love, those that are in our communities? And it is really not an us versus them kind of mentality that we approach this from. So please don't hear that as you hear us unpacking some of the history of this. I realize that in many ways we are seeing some of the exact same things that those who support abortion see, but we are definitely coming at it from a different perspective of understanding when life has value, when women have value, when men have value, and what the family is.
Right. I want to take a moment and just stop and say, the reality is if you're watching this, abortion might be a part of your story.
Yeah. And
I just want to say, hey, you are loved. You are welcome here. It does not disqualify you whatsoever from being a mentor. It is not the unspeakable and unforgivable sin. It is just something that happened. If that is part of your story, we're going to ask that maybe you have
if you haven't processed that.
If you have not processed that in a healthy and meaningful way, if you've not gone through healing, if you've not gotten just experienced the forgiveness that is available, we're going to maybe want to have a conversation about that. But I just want you to know that you are loved. There is no guilt. There is no shame. There is no condemnation. And I don't want this to be something that you carry in a weighty way. We just are wanting to make sure that this is great education about what abortion is.
Yeah, one of the things that we see is like women or men who have had abortions think, gosh, if I could go mentor somebody who has an unexpected pregnancy, maybe somehow I could like make up for that. And that's not what's happening here. right? Is like there is full forgiveness regardless of what you do or how great of a mentor you are through Christ. His blood covers all of our sins. There is no way that we can earn His love. That forgiveness is brought to us, and it makes us clean, not clean with an asterisk, okay? And so make sure that if that's a part of your story, that you work with our Worth More ministry for women or men. If you're not in our area, that you find an after-abortion recovery ministry that would care for you, that would love you well, and then plug you in and help you serve. So we would love for you to join our team, but want to make sure that you address that first. And so we definitely envision a pro-woman culture, that educational and employment options are available for women. We realize that this isn't just a ministry that we can handle all ourselves and we can be the solutions for everything, and it's why our Community Development Corporation has a job staffing program that comes alongside women. I mean, it's such a beautiful thing to see the church use all of its gifts and all of its resources to come alongside and care for these women and men and set them up for success to provide for their families. We want to empower and support women through unexpected pregnancies, and we want to restore the dignity of fatherhood. So we want to come alongside those dads. This isn't just a women's ministry for women. This is for men to do as well, and yet we see way fewer men come through this, often because they've, again, bought those lies. They've bought the cultural narrative that's out there to just go, hey, this is her decision. I'm going to support whatever she decides.
You know, I am excited to say that we currently are having a couple that are being mentored through our ministry. It's just one of the first times we've been able to do this, but a woman has come through, and so the father of the baby actually raised his hand and said, hey, I would like to have a mentor as well. And so both of them are being supported and mentored through our ministry as they walk through this together. And so it is just awesome to see that work out and happen. And so, hey, we're here for the men just as much as we are for the women. One of the things we want to make sure we highlight is what are the impacts on health when someone's having an abortion. So it might be that the girl that you are mentoring or the man that you're mentoring has a woman that they are considering abortion. And so I think it's important that you...
even if they've already decided, like, hey, I'm going to keep the child, they may be holding that abortion decision kind of the back of their mind of like, hey, I've always got this out if I really have to or something changes. That's
very true. Yeah. And so I think it's important that you have an idea of what are some of the mental health and physical health impacts that happen on the body. If you look in your binder, it goes through what some of the percentages are for risk of mental health issues. Also, substance abuse is a higher risk from someone that's has had an abortion, and it also can impact their ability to have children, their ability to carry a child to term. There could be low birth rate in future children, and preterm labor and all kinds of things that happen to a woman's body. And I think it's important to know that whenever someone has an abortion, the body is not meant to do that. And so it is forcing your body into something it was not meant to do. And so there are lasting implications that can happen on a woman's body, and that could be long-lasting.
So one of the things is you're talking about just the long-term impacts is the issues of mental health problems with depression, with suicide. It's important, I think, as you're mentoring that we understand we're not trying to fearmonger anybody into not choosing abortion. We just want to make sure that they're equipped and educated. We mean that genuinely. That we even go, hey, let's talk about abortion. Let's talk about that decision and what that looks like, and then not find ourselves like trying to paint it in this ultra bad light, where we recognize that there are some horrific, brutal aspects of it, and then there are also some long-lasting implications to it. That women who make that decision have other issues to deal with afterwards. When I look at child trauma and some of the work that we do on the foster care and adoption side of our ministries, I know that when someone is traumatized, the body keeps the score. So they can track the sights, smells, and other experiences and senses that they endured during whatever that traumatic event was later on in life. And they may not even remember it. It may not be something that they keep in their conscience, but subconsciously, their body stores that information. And when they come across that same sight, smell, environment, it triggers that traumatic event again, and they get stuck in it. So again, I'm not encouraging you to sort of exasperate the situation by trying to paint abortion in this negative light as if all women, suffer this, that, or another. But there are some very real implications to an abortion decision that we want to be clear about as we unpack that.
So I think when you are counseling your mentee, one of the things that might be helpful to say is, have you thought through this, that, and the other? What could be the implications if you were to make an abortion decision? And just try to have a conversation about that in a loving and careful way.
Yeah, maybe what would change your mind if you experienced depression afterwards? Would that make you go, hey, maybe this isn't a decision that I want to make? Or if you got into a substance abuse in order to cope, would that change anything for you? Or just have you thought through how you might cope afterwards as you're just having a conversation with this person that you're mentoring or that you're connecting with? So I want you to read this quote that's there on your screen, and I'm not going to read the entire thing, but I do want to pull out this sentence from this young woman who is promoting abortion access. She says, "And if abortion is part of a woman's quest, I would have the experience be painless, nurturing, free, safe, and without stigma." And so I just think there are some things in that. It's like, it sounds great to say that when people suffer a traumatic event, that we want it to be painless, that we want it to be nurturing, we want it to be free. Like we want this healthcare idea to be free. We want it to be safe, and we want it to not have any stigma. We want her to be able to do it completely in private, and yet that's just not reality. And so what comes to mind for you as you kind of think about that specific statement?
I just think that it is so opposite of what God's truth is for us, and that it is not something that we should experience at all, and it should never be a part of our quest, and that it is not painless, and it is not nurturing. It might be free. It is definitely not safe. And I think that the culture today is trying to make it be without stigma, but I think there's so many women that you would ask, hey, do you have a stigma because of a past abortion that you have had? And the answer is going to be yes.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that comes to mind for me, even as I just think about kind of politics, is like, look, we know it's not free. We know that it costs a medical professional something to be there. There are all kinds of restrictions and things, not necessarily because of what abortion is, but because it's a medical procedure that are required there. And so, I mean, it does put to mind like okay, well, in what kind of world does it seem just, right, equal, any of those things to say, hey, because a woman becomes pregnant, then that responsibility has now been put on society to make sure that she isn't pregnant anymore. It really is ignoring the biological imperative that says, look, if you're having sex, then you are likely to become pregnant at some point. And that is the way that you were designed. It is really a rejection of God as creator, of human design as a whole, for us to go, look, we just want it to be free because a woman's not responsible for being pregnant because, her body did this thing.
Well, it's interesting, though. I was doing some research on some of the abortion clinics that are just across the border in New Mexico. And for those of you that don't know, that even though abortion is illegal after 20 weeks here in the state of Texas, it is not in New Mexico. So you can drive across the border up to 40 weeks and have an abortion. And I was looking at the website, just doing some research on my own, I was just curious. And you can easily get what they call a scholarship for an abortion there in New Mexico if you can't afford it. And so there are people out there that are trying to make this a true reality.
Yeah. So here in the state of Texas, abortion is currently legal up to 20 weeks gestation. There is currently a heartbeat bill that would reduce that down to like 6 weeks. However, of all the other states that have passed heartbeat bills, none of them have stood. So we are what you would call abolitionists. We would say, hey, there's never a justification for abortion. We don't want to create any loopholes. We would say, look, abortion should be illegal at all points, regardless of exceptions, rape, incest, anything like that. And there are all kinds of reasons for that we're happy to unpack, or you could check out in our ProLife Apologetics equipping ministry. But ultrasounds are required at least 24 hours before an abortion. Parental consent for a minor to have an abortion is required. However, there are judicial bypasses that allow even a minor to get an abortion without parental consent.
And that is very easy to obtain.
Yeah, that's crazy.
I think it is actually just lip service that they say that a minor can't get an abortion without parental consent.
And that's the kind of thing where we just go, gosh, we don't want to create loopholes that could be taken advantage of, because the abortion industry is not interested in being above reproach or having integrity. They're interested in what they would call women's rights, and they're interested in staying in business. And so only women and abortionists are exempt from the legal ramifications of abortions. Even men or family members who contribute to pay for an abortion are legally culpable for accessory to murder. However, a DA and a judge and all the levels of our legal system would be required to exact that justice and to see that through in order for that to be illegal. But that's not typically what happens.
So when you're looking at our area here in Dallas, within 5 miles of the 2 abortion clinics that are near us, there are 40 plus churches. In fact, the Southwest Surgery Center is 5 miles from Watermark?
That's 3 miles, yeah.
It's 3 miles from Watermark. Right here in our backyard is a very prolific abortion clinic here for the entire DFW area.
Yeah, I would say on average there are about 10 or 15 women per hour that go into the clinic to get an abortion. And so we go and do sidewalk counseling again and just reach out to them. But that's something that is prevalent. It's not just women who are poor. It's women of every socioeconomic background. And yet pregnancy resource centers are right there in the exact same parking lot available to serve those women. So we will often say, like, hey, did you know you could get a free ultrasound in this exact same parking lot? You could get all the support and resources that you might need to care for your child. We could help you do that.
Yeah, typically pregnancy resources or these clinics, they offer a pregnancy confirmation, which is done either through a blood or a urine test. So they'll also give you a proof of pregnancy document, which is required when they are going to get CHIP or pregnancy Medicaid. And they will also give maternity counseling. So if they can determine that you maybe are thinking of an abortion, they might call that an abortion determined woman or abortion considering woman. They are going to counsel on that. They're going to counsel on parenting. They're going to also possibly counsel on adoption. Another thing they will do is assistance with Medicaid applications and insurance. Or if they don't do that there, they have places that they refer to, and we also have that information as well to help you if you need to help your mentee apply for Medicaid or for CHIP. We have resources to help you do that with your mentee. They can provide sonograms, and they now often provide STT testing, which is just another way that they combat with Planned Parenthood. Planned Parenthood said, hey, we do all this as health care for women. Well, the pregnancy resource centers that are pro-life also can do that for women as well. But I also want to stop and say our Watermark Urgent Care is now able to do all these things as well. They now have a sonogram machine there on site. They have trained technicians that can give a sonogram, that can give the proof of pregnancy. They have just the urine test and the blood test. They'll have you come back and do that. They do counseling there on site, and then they can pass on to someone from our team as well.
Yeah. So anytime that you hear somebody say, gosh, Christians are just pro-birth, they hate sex, all this kind of rhetoric that's out there, it's just not true. I thought for the longest time and bought into that of like, oh gosh, we are just pro-birth. We just want to see that child born and then we don't care anymore. There are all kinds of resources available that the church is supporting, that the church is behind, that are the volunteers that are caring for these women and these children as they continue to grow. And so I would just encourage you, like, step back from that for just a second. There's even a clinic right across the street from the abortion clinic closest to our church that will see a woman through all the way through her delivery, that will help her pay for that, do a sliding scale for financial help. And it is remarkable what the church has done and how far we've gone to care for these individuals and go, you are loved, you are cared for, you are treasured and cherished because you are made in the image of God. And so the last thing that we want to make sure that you take an opportunity to do is watch videos of current abortion procedures. We realize that that is a weighty ask on our part, but we need you to be informed about what abortion actually is, that it's not just sort of this sterile idea that's out there, but it really does in the life of a child in very brutal ways. And so there are primarily 4 different procedures. We'll let you go online and watch them, but abortionprocedures.com is where you want to go to learn more about that.
I will say they are animated, so you're not actually watching a live abortion procedure. They are animated. However, It is graphic. It explains really what is the process and what happens. It'll probably wreck your day, but I think that if we want to talk about this in a very educated way, we need to know what the different procedures are and what that actually entails and what they do.
Yeah. Thanks for joining us for Abortion 101 in Session 3, and we'll see you in Session 4.